In this recording, I'm going to go over how to have your creature be responsive to mouse inputs. And I'm going to start with just some basic shapes and concepts. And I'm going to think about this creature on the left here and note that you see the mouse moving back and forth and how the arms move with the cursor, and then if you press the belly button it changes colors of the appendages. Now you can play around with this by clicking on the example creature here and actually messing around with it. And there's some just basic concepts to know, and I'm going to go over them in processing in just a second. I do just want to point out that the creature's right arm does have a limit, whereas the creature's left arm does go ahead and actually moves all the way down with the mouse. So we'll go over that kind of in another video. So what I have is just some simple code in a sketch, and when I run it, I get a rectangle that moves around the screen wherever my mouse is, and when I press my mouse, I get a color change. So when I look at this code, I have a basic setup where I create the size of my canvas. I then have a void draw where I'm constantly redrawing the rectangle where the mouse is. So I have a background color. I have two functions here. The translate, mouseX, mousey, tells me to translate the origin point to wherever my mouse is. So there's a mouse X that goes across left and right and a mouse Y that goes down. And the rect mode center just tells the rectangle to start from the center rather than from the upper left like it normally does. And then I have my rectangle here, and its origin point is 0, 0 because of this translate function. The origin point is always mouse X and mouse Y. And there's a conditional if mouse pressed, so when I press the mouse. So if it's pressed and the answer is yes, I get a different fill color than the normal fill color. So there's a lot happening there, and what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go ahead and I have a blank sketch, and we are just going to start from scratch. So I'm going to do my void setup, and when I do these commands and functions, I like to get all of the punctuation right before I fill in stuff. So I do the void setup with the closed parentheses and the curly brackets, and then I set my size, and again before I give the size I do the parentheses and the semicolon. Then I'm going to do 800 by 800. And so now I'm just going to test this out, right? And I should get a canvas that's 800 by 800. I can then do void draw, and same thing here. And here I'm just going to go way down and do another curly bracket. And so whatever happens here is going to be constantly redrawn. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and make my rectangle. And again, I'm going to do the parentheses and curly bracket. Then I'm going to go ahead and type 0, 0, 200, 200. And when I play this, I'm going to get a rectangle that starts in the upper left and is 200 wide by 200 tall. Now to go ahead and move this around, I would have to change the X and Y coordinates. So I can change this to 400 and 400, and it would start in the middle and then go down towards the lower right. But I'm going to go ahead and do 0 and 0, because then I'm going to go ahead and add my rect mode and then center, and that's got to be in all caps. And then I do that, and now the rectangle is going to be half off the screen because it's starting from the center rather than the upper left. And then the next command I'm going to do is translate. And this basically will move the center to wherever you want. So a classic one is width divided by 2, height divided by 2, which will give you the rectangle in the center. All right, so the width is just the width and the height is just the height. I also know that that's 400 by 400 in this case since I have an 800 pixel grid setup, but this is just more modular in case you do change the size of the grid, right? So I could get the same result with this. Now, to make this rectangle respond to mouse inputs, I can go ahead and write mouse X and mouse Y. And again, capitalization is important. So then when I do this, I am constantly drawing a rectangle wherever my mouse is. And the reason that I'm just seeing lots of rectangles is because I'm only setting up my canvas once and I'm just drawing a rectangle on top of it. So, excuse me, if I want a rectangle to just stay there, I have to put a background color under the draw, and then I'll go back to just having my one rectangle that is moving around with my mouse. Now the trick with the translate command is if I then go ahead and do an ellipse, and let's say I do 200, 200, and I'll make this 100 wide and 50 tall, it is doing the 200, 200, that's its XY, that's the center of the ellipse. It is doing that from the translate mouse X, mouse Y. So it's always staying in relation to my mouse command. So that can be nice if you want your creature to move around and you can be like, okay, that ellipse isn't quite where I want it. I know that I have a rectangle at 0, 0. So maybe I want to put the ellipse in the lower right corner of my rectangle, right? And I could have that, or I could do the upper right, right? So it could be kind of like an ear, and then it will move around with it, right? Now, if you only want certain things to move and other things not to move, you just have to be careful of how you are using them. And to isolate these, you would use a push matrix and a pop matrix. So if I wanted the ellipse to be somewhere consistent, I would write a pop matrix, push matrix, pop matrix, and then what I should get is a rectangle that is moving. And because the translate is only in the push matrix, it's not affecting anything outside of it. So my ellipse is staying, but my rectangle is moving. So that is how to get a basic input, mouse input, using the mouse X and mouse Y buttons. You can use those in many different ways, right? In my particular creature, I set it up a little bit differently. I used the mouse X and mouse Y on particular points of a quad shape. And, so I'm just going to bring that up. And let me go find the right arm here. So I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to do the left arm. And just copy this in for a second. Pop the matrix here so that the rectangle is going to be affected by it. So then I'm going to just paste in this quad and replay this. And since I have a rectangle that is moving with my mouse, and then I have some stationary points on the quad like 500 and 250, but then my next point, 600 mouse Y plus 75, is meaning that just the right hand side of this quad shape is moving. So you can do this with any shape that has you input strictly vertices. So you could do a quad shape, a triangle, and things like that to make this change shape using the mouse Y and mouse X commands. In the next video, I'm going to go over adding a conditional to use for the mouse pressed command.